According to leaked reports, it sounds like President Zelensky is preparing to fire Ukraine's top general. Just what would cause the president to fire one of the most popular leaders in the entire country? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's break down what's really going on behind the scenes. Okay, so the overall contours of the story. Valery Zelensky, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, right? We've seen his face all over the news about Ukraine, and he's been commander of the armed forces since the invasion begun. And I want to point out that while Ukraine has certainly had a lot of struggles, they have performed vastly better than almost anyone else believed they could. And he is largely responsible for this. He is considered young by general standards, by armed forces standards. He's also notable in that he has never served in the Soviet Red Army. Instead, he has been trained and brought up in NATO doctrine, a more flexible mission command-oriented doctrine. And he is responsible. Yes, he was in charge for the largely failed counteroffensive last year, but he was also oversaw the offensives that did retake territory in Kherson and in Kharkiv, as well, of course, as the Battle of Kiev, which saw the Russian forces pushed back. So with this kind of reputation, why would Zelensky fire him? And the rumor is actually that Zelensky has already fired Zelensky. And that's because essentially the spark that kind of set off this chain of events was his 2023 article in The Economist, right? He wrote an essay that that called the war a stalemate or a deadlock, and recommended a number of policy changes that he felt would likely increase the odds that Ukraine could break this stalemate. Now, going publicly against what at the time was the Ukrainian government's official position, which is that the war was not a deadlock, that Ukraine was still pursuing a strategy that would allow them to achieve battlefield success. Now, it was even more dire, because in the article he said, quote, "We must acknowledge the significant advantage enjoyed by the enemy," that's Russia, "in mobilizing human resources, and how that compares with the inability of state institutions in Ukraine to improve the manpower levels of our armed forces without the use of unpopular measures." And this is a fact. Actually, CNN published this last Thursday. So he's doubling down on his position, which usually, if you're going to say something like that, call out your other institutions and political leaders, it's usually because you know your time is up. So Zelensky is willing to speak truth to power, which is strike one in against any general, right? Especially speaking truth to power in public. The second cardinal sin the general had or committed was that he became a little too popular. In opinion polls, Zelensky was found to have actually been substantially, almost 20% more popular than Zelensky himself. And when you combine that with his public profile, even being named one of Time Magazine's most 100 influential people in 2022, he looks more and more like a potential political rival, not just a military talent. And the fact is that he proved able to build networks and contacts with paramilitaries and Ukrainian nationalists that were very skeptical of Zelensky. So while those relationships were instrumental in building the Ukrainian military that could resist Russian aggression, it also meant that he appeared, at least on the surface, to be a political rival of Zelensky, right? By making bedfellows, so to speak, with some of his political adversaries. Now, we also need to talk about the alternatives, and there are some other names being batted around as potential replacements for Zelensky. And I think overall we're seeing, when you have a situation where a conflict is stuck in a stalemate, then you have to start to look for ways to mix things up. And sometimes just changing tactics is itself a excellent strategy. But if you feel like your goals, your objectives in your own life are a little static and you need something to give you that extra boost to get in the gym, hustle harder at work, or stay focused on your hobbies, you want to look no further than Strike Gum. Strike Gum is, of course, my gum. It is an energy drink alternative, right? This little piece has the same amount of caffeine as an Amp Energy or a Red Bull, but it has 0 sugar and 90 milligrams of caffeine. So if you're somebody who's dropping $4, $5 on one of those energy drinks at a gas station, can pick up some Strike Gum instead. You can go to strikegum.com. We have a new customer discounts. We have military discounts. We even have gift cards if you're looking for a Valentine's Day gift for someone who maybe has ordered some Strike Gum and wants to order some more. So check us out, strikegum.com. Okay, now let's talk about who they think is going to replace Zelensky. One name being batted around is, of course, General Alexander Syrski. This is he's nearly 10 years older than Zelensky and a graduate of the Soviet version of West Point. Though this is FP's reporting, says that some of Ukraine's rank and file can't stand him since they believe he commits to operations like Bakhmut, which focused on holding a tactically unimportant territory instead of preserving that combat power for the counteroffensive or pushing to cut off Russia's access points to Crimea. But another name that's been floated around is Lieutenant General Krylo Budanov, Ukraine's defense intelligence chief. And we know Budanov, he is another highly public figure. If they're firing Zelensky for being a little too politically popular and a little too likely to rival Zelensky, well, General General Budanov, General Budanov is an even worse option. He's young, he is very public, and he is very effective, right? Ukrainians, intelligence services and special forces have had some stunning battlefield successes, and his reputation is even more considerable. But there's some issues, right? If he would be brought in, the world of special operations and intelligence demands a very analytical mind, but what it doesn't have is a lot of logistics, right? Generally, you're talking about logistical problems that are involve maybe specialty technology, right? 3 or 4 aircraft need a super accurate missile, or a special forces team needs a special type of drone. But when you're fighting a war at this scale, you need the ability to get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops, food, fuel, equipment, medical care, rotations on and off the front line. You need to train them. You need to heal them. You need to get them equipment, new weapon systems, but also fix their broken rifles, get them new optics, get them batteries for their optics. These are extremely difficult military problems that have plagued militaries for time immemorial. And the ability to do that is something that General Zelensky has proven the ability to do. And he is also out recommending solutions to not just the manpower issues, but the logistics issues Ukrainian military is facing. So is switching over to someone with very limited logistical experience at scale a good call for Ukraine? It remains to be seen. Of course, some of the analysts acknowledge that Ukraine has a lot of tactical disadvantages that it's facing, namely the failure of the counteroffensive, and it's not clear without U.S. military aid. It's not really clear how that's going to move. Ukraine is going to take the fight back to Russia. They're still having considerable battlefield success, and I point that again because Zelensky's decision to pivot to a more efficient defense and depth strategy has been extremely effective. It's hard to understate the fact that Ukraine is unbelievably efficient at killing Russians, right? Very rarely are Russians even making it to the battlefield to fight. And when they do, the fights are almost always one-sided, attritional affairs with Ukrainian drones and artillery grinding Russians into the dirt. So I think he is a great choice to remain in his position. And it seems like he is being fired mostly for being too popular and too politically savvy. So I think it overall does not bode that well for Ukraine. But guys, let me know in the comments if you think he should stick around or if you think there should be a new face running the war. Of course, thank you guys to our Colonel tier members at combatvetnews.com, our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do this without you guys. See you in the next one. Cheers.